So, I just got to finally sit down and watch Zack Snider's brand new movie, Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver. This is the sequel to Rebel Moon Part 1, which came out only about 5 months ago. Crazy that he released 2 movies at the same exact time. It's almost like these were filmed as one movie that he, for some reason, decided to split into 2 parts. I wonder, because this certainly felt like the second part of one movie. And it was definitely not a great second part of what was not a great first part. Rebel Moon Part 2 is one of, and I hate to say it, it's one of the worst movies I've seen in quite a long time. And I gotta say, I am not a Zack Snider hater. I'm also not a Zack Snider fanboy. I'm not one of these people that is beloved Zack Snider, that's just in love with everything he does. I love a lot of his movies. I am really, really in love with a lot of his work. I think Watchmen is one of the best superhero movies ever, and it goes very underappreciated. But I'm also somebody who's a little bit honest about Zack Snider. I temper my expectations with his work because he's made some stinkers. This movie is a stinker. I'm just going to be honest here. And if you remember back in December when I reviewed Rebel Moon Part 1, I was not a big fan of that movie as well, but I gave it the benefit of the doubt. I said that it had some decent world building. It had a decent scope, decent ideas. I enjoyed some of the characters. I liked the Zack Snider isms that film was bringing to the table, and I was interested to see where the film would go next, where that universe would go next, because there was a bigger world teased, and honestly, I dig all of that shit in fantasy and sci-fi. When you give me an interesting world with interesting world building and Game of Thrones like elements with kings and queens, I eat that shit up even when it's bad. So I was so excited for Part 2 because I thought it would be diving more into that and less about protecting this boring little village with these, unimportant, uninteresting characters. It turns out Part 2 is the same exact plot as Part 1. Just done again. So what do I mean by that? Well, Part 1 was essentially about this main character. Her name is Cora. She's played by Sofia Boutella, and she plays this character who was kind of this soldier for the Empire, this evil Empire, and she got essentially thrown out of the Empire, framed for doing a bunch of terrible things, and now she's hiding away in this village. These bad Nazi Empire soldiers come down. This main Nazi Emperor guy comes down, and he says, we're gonna take over this village, because fuck all of you guys, we're bad. So Cora has to go, and she assembles this team, and they fight the Nazis, they beat the Nazis, they win. Woohoo! This movie starts with essentially telling you that the Nazi guys that they just beat, the main Nazi dude they just killed, he's not dead, and he's coming back with a Nazi army. So what are they gonna have to do? They're gonna have to protect the village again, and kill the Nazi dudes. Woo! And that's what this movie is. It's essentially the same exact thing, just done again. And they give you a little bit more exposition on the larger world, which I'll give it this. When this movie is actually showing you glimpses of the outer world and giving you more stuff on the lore of this universe that Zack Snyder has created, I was interested. When you see Cora's backstory with how the king and the queen of this universe and that royal family kind of got, knocked off, and how the emperor, the new regent, became the regent, that is interesting to me. And this plotline of having to eventually go after him and fight him, that could be something. Unfortunately, it's not in this movie, and because of that, I'm almost willing to bet we will never see it because this movie is a failure. Instead, we get a nonsense battle. That's what this whole movie is. It's just a nonsense battle that is essentially a rehash of what happened in the first movie, and it ends in the same spot. I've never seen anything like this, where a Part 2 ends in the same exact spot as the Part 1. The characters don't grow, the story doesn't move, nothing moves. It ends in the same place. It's one of the weirdest things ever. The characters are completely unmemorable. Outside of Cora, I don't know anything about any of these characters, nor do I care. I just have no interest in any of them. The action here, although at times is good, it's flashy, it's the Zack Snyder combat, you either love it or you hate it. At times, I enjoy it, at times not so much. The slow motion, some shots look really great, some I hate. Anthony Hopkins is in this movie. That's all I have to say about that. I just think this is really disappointing. Listen, when Zack Snyder announced that he was going to be doing an original, massive sci-fi series, that he wanted it to be a big new franchise. He wanted to create a Star Wars-like franchise. I got excited, and the fact that Netflix backed him all the way made me even more excited, because I want to see something like this. I want to see something huge like this come organically out into the film industry world, into film, into cinema, in a way that's different than how it usually does. Usually when big sci-fi fantasy series come, they're spawning off of books, they're adapting other sources, they're not coming up by themselves, by a filmmaker creating them. So I was so excited for this because it would have paved the way for more stuff like this in the future. But unfortunately, Zack Snyder built a world that might be so cool. He built visuals that are really awesome. He built just so many ideas that are so cool, and decided to tell the most boring story with the most boring characters possible within this world in 2 movies. This should have been one. Rebel Moon should have been one movie about them protecting this village, and it would have been passable, and maybe we would have been interested in a sequel, but unfortunately we got 2 parts, both of which are completely stripped down into way too long runtimes. They're boring, the action just doesn't do enough to save the film, the characters are nothing burgers, and the story doesn't move a beat in this second part. And it's such a shame. Like I said, there's really cool stuff in this. I like when one of the characters is talking about their backstory, about how he was a king on another world, and they showing you like these weird images of that world before the Empire had invaded it, and there's like giant birds, and like, there's just such weird fantasy shit that I eat up. That's what we needed more of. Less of protecting a boring fucking village. Imagine if Star Wars A New Hope was just about Luke protecting, like, the little village in Tatooine, his little home, and that was the entire movie. And then Empire Strikes Back came out, and it's just about him protecting that little village again. That's what this is. Just, you know, Korra's significantly less interesting than Luke Skywalker. They even brought in lightsabers in this movie. There's like a ton of action scenes with things that are not lightsabers, but they're lightsabers. They're big swords with red and blue lights. I mean, come on, man. Really? You know, I know this movie was based on an original script that was supposed to be a Star Wars movie, and I really feel it in this movie. I feel like the script hasn't really gone above what Star Wars originally was, which is why it doesn't dive into the larger aspects of the universe. Because although Zack Snyder has clearly been developing that outside universe, outside of the Star Wars universe, his own extended universe, obviously the original script that he had developed for this movie was taking place in a Star Wars universe with the Empire, which was being led by Vader and, you know, Palpatine, and they couldn't do much with that in his original script, because obviously you can't interfere with the original movie. So what do? You have original characters protecting a small little village, you have evil Nazi guys come from the Empire and fight, and they don't do anything to expand from that. That would have been fine if it was in the Star Wars universe, but it's not. It's in its own universe that you can interfere with. We can go up and fight the Emperor. We can do world-changing things, but he doesn't do it. He's waiting for a third movie that's never going to happen, and unfortunately, we're left with a steaming pile of poop that is so unfortunate and so disappointing. Because yet again, there's no person on planet Earth that wanted this movie to succeed more than me, besides maybe Zack Snyder. And it's just so sad that it didn't, because yet again, I am a Zack Snyder fan. I'm not a huge fanboy of him, but I love Watchmen. I even love Army of the Dead, his first movie he made with Netflix. I love the Snyder Cut. I love his DC films. I think he has a style that usually works for me. This movie is just what happens when you get overly ambitious and you forget to tell a damn story with good characters who actually act like human beings. Instead, we get a movie of just nonsense and nonsense and nonsense that builds to nothing, and it's building off of part 1 that was also a nothing burger, maybe slightly less of a nothing burger, but this one is a big nothing burger. I can't believe this film even exists. I mean, there's a scene in this movie, they tell you, you know, when you're learning how to make movies, they tell you show, don't tell, show, don't tell. Don't have people give you expository scenes, don't have long exposition scenes. There's a scene in this movie where there's like 6 characters sitting at a table, and each one of them gives your expository background story. Now, some of the stuff you see is interesting. I mentioned it in the video. Some of those scenes are the best in the whole freaking movie, in the whole of the 2 movies. But then they just keep going and going, and the scene lasts forever. And some of the characters give the same exact backstory. Here's how the Empire wronged me. Now I want revenge. Here's how the Empire wronged me. Now I want revenge. It gets so boring and so weird, and it's so poorly written that it just makes no sense. And that's how I feel about the characters in this movie as a whole. I just feel like all of them are just boring. Can anybody in watching this video tell me the name of one of these characters outside of Korra? I can't. And there are so many talented people in this cast, it's kind of unbelievable. Now I'm going to stop ranting on this film, I'm going to stop talking shit, because I do like Zack Snyder a lot. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but Zack Snyder has officially entered the tier of directors list, right next to M. Night Shyamalan. Now that is both a good and a bad thing. M. Night Shyamalan is a very talented director. He has made some bangers of films, Unbreakable, Split, The Visit, you know, the Sixth Sense, it goes on and on and on. He's made great movies, but he's also made Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? He's made a lot of bad movies on top of it. So Zack Snyder's on that same weird realm where at his best, he's making classics. He's making some of the best movies we will get. Movies that will live in Hollywood and cinema forever, like 300. But at his worst, he's Rebel Moon. And Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver, is a 1 out of 5. So that's the video, guys. What do you guys think of Rebel Moon Part 1 and Part 2? Let me know down below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe for more. Make sure to click on the video on your screen right now to see more of my content. I'll see you guys in the next one.